Hi. Today we are reading Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And let me just get comfy here. um, yeah, I've been reading it. Sorry, you know me. I'm a little brain dead. Always, all the time. Um, I've been doing a book study on it the past few weeks. So this week we're on chapter 3. So I'm so sorry. I feel like every time I start a book on here, it's never chapter 1, except for Peter Pan. Also, okay, cool. I just ate. I just made really good chicken for dinner. So anyway, yeah, never chapter 1. So sorry about that. But we're on chapter 3. You haven't missed a whole lot. So that's cool. So the book is about I'll just give you a little recap on the first 2 chapters. The book is about a pilgrim. It's just a guy, and he gets a hold of the Bible, and he's reading. Hi, how are you? Anyway, it's this guy. He gets a hold of the Bible. He's reading the gospel, and it reading about his sin, and if he doesn't, get on the right path, basically choose God, then he's going to die one day and go to hell. Pretty much. It's pretty harsh, but that's how it is. So he's instantly burdened with his sin and this knowledge, and the fact that he believes the gospel. He's like, I gotta figure it out. I gotta do what I gotta do to be saved. And he's all worried. And I'm giving a recap on the book I'm about to read. So we're reading chapter 3. So I'm just kind of telling you chapter 1 and 2. So he also tries to, his family is worried about him because he's instantly in despair. He's like, we're all gonna die. And they're like, maybe he just needs sleep. I don't know. They're worried about him. And he tries to tell them about what he's read about, and they just don't believe him. So he leaves his city, and he meets this guy named Evangelist, and he tells him that he needs to get on the path. He basically tells him where to go. The first place he tells him to go to is there's a gate that he has to go to. And so he's on his way, walking there, and his neighbors are following him from the city he just left, and they're trying to convince him to come back. And he tells them about the gospel and about what he read and the news. And one of them is like, you're crazy, I'm going back home. The other one is like, I think I'll come with you. It sounds cool. Because he's like, if you do follow the right path, you get to go to heaven, and all these wonderful things are in store for you. So that's all that guy hears. And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. I'm gonna come with you. And so they're both going together. That guy's name is Pliable. And in this book, the characters' names are pretty much what they are. So Pliable is easily swayed, I always think of pliable as like Play-Doh. You can easily shape it how you want. So he tells him this, so he's like, yeah, I'll go with you. Instantly, they fall into the swamp of, I want to say, everything is just called what it is. So I think it's the swamp of despair, but I might be wrong. Hold on. But they fall into this swamp, and Pliable is instantly like, what have you gotten me into? This is nothing like what you said it was going to be. I'm out of here. And he climbs himself out of the swamp and leaves Christian, the main character. Christian can't get out. The swamp of despair. I was right. Christian can't get out because he's burdened. He actually believed the gospel, so he's burdened by his sin. He has this like physical burden on his back, so he can't get out of the swamp. And Pliable wasn't burdened because all he heard was all these good things. So I'm gonna come for that, and he doesn't care that he needs to work to be saved. You know, he doesn't believe that he should be burdened by his sin and stuff. So basically, Christian is stuck in this swamp, and then this man named Help comes, and he helps him out of the swamp. And Help is telling him, you know, along the way in life, we're gonna face these times where we're in despair, and there are actually steps that God's made for us to climb out of these swamps. But sometimes you can't see them, so it's easy to feel like you're stuck in the swamp of despair. But next time it happens, find the steps and get yourself out with like spending time with God, reading scripture or something. And that one went right over my head when I read it. I didn't know what he was talking about, but we have like a Bible, like a study guide. So it helps make sense of some of these things. But yeah, the dude's name was Help. I like Help. He's cool. And I like the study guide asked, like, was there ever a time when you were just in this time of like hopelessness and total despair, and you just thought it wasn't gonna get any better in your life, and then someone came along, like, and they offered up encouragement and stuff, like, who is someone who is like help in your life? Which I like that question because I have someone like that in my life, and she's the best, and I instantly thought of her when I read that question. But anyway, okay, so gets out of the swamp, meets a man named Mr. Worldly Wiseman. So he tells him, oh yeah, you're on the wrong path. You need to go down this path and go to this city, and there's a man there that can actually help you get your burden off your back. Because that's all a Christian wants. I mean, he wants to be on the right path, end up in heaven, but like right now his immediate concern is like, get this dang burden off my back. It's like weighing me down. And so he's like, yeah, you could get it off way faster if you go to this city. Thanks. If you go to this city, there's a man named Legality, Mr. Legality there, who can get it off of you. So he's like, oh, word. So he basically gets off the right path for like a shortcut to get his burden off, instead of what Evangelist told him to do. Evangelist told him, go to the distant gate, and there's someone there who's going to let you in, and then they'll tell you where to go to get your burden off. But Mr. Worldly Wiseman is like, this place, like a mile away, like right there, they can get it off for you way faster. So he's like, oh, let's do that. So he gets off the path, and he goes to this other city. When he gets there, instantly almost dies. There's like this ledge that he almost falls off of, and he's like instantly like, okay, this doesn't feel right. So he's like frozen in fear, and Evangelist comes back to him. He's like on his way, and he passes by, and he's like, Christian, what are you doing here? I told you to go that way. And he's like, yeah, well, I met this guy, and he told me to go here, and like blah blah blah. And he's like, yeah, okay, so there are going to be people in your life, like Mr. Worldly Wiseman, who are going to try to get you off the right path. They're going to try to tell you that what you believe is stupid, that, you know, it doesn't make sense logically. There are, like, better ways to go in life that are better for you. Like, you can get the reward that you're seeking way faster. You want to not listen to those people, because the reward that God promises is so good that it shouldn't be easy to get. Like, it's so good, it's worth all the, I don't know which word to use, but it's worth the journey. It's worth how much time and effort it takes to get to it. because nothing is really worth that much if it doesn't take much effort, I feel like. So that was kind of the point with that and whatnot. And so he's like, okay. So he's like, next time someone approaches you like that, you just need to stay on the path. And so he's like, okay, sorry. So he gets back on the right path. He ends up at the gate. They let him in because he knocks. And that man tells him, go to the house of the interpreter. That chapter, I'm actually really glad I didn't read to you guys because it got really deep and confusing. The interpreter, basically, the house, he takes him through different, I think it's 5, maybe, or 7 different rooms of the house where there are different, like, demonstrations that he shows him for concepts, like, I don't even know. It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. I don't even know how to explain that one. But basically, he leaves that house, but he learns a lot of good lessons to keep in mind about God and life and all that. I don't know. It was really good. I just don't really feel like I don't have the energy to try and recap that one. So, we're on chapter 3. And let me put you right here. I don't know why my... Okay, stay. Stay like that. Blah. Okay, so this chapter is called... I wish Ethan were here because he actually wanted... Or Vincent, because he wanted to hear this book. It's very interesting. And I think it's going to get better and better. Chapter 3 is called Arrival at the Cross. Now, in my dream, I saw a Christian on a highway that was fenced on both sides by a wall named Salvation. He started running up the way, but quickly found this difficult due to the burden that was still on his back. Oh, by the way, if you're still here when I'm done, I gotta show you the birthday card, because I finished it. And it's so cute, and it turned out great. So, I gotta show you. I meant to put it right there so I could just pick it up and show you, but I forgot. But anyway, yeah. Okay. As he ran to the top of what seemed like a small hill, he saw a cross, and below it a tomb. Just as he approached the cross, his burden fell off his back and tumbled down the hill until it rolled into the opening of the tomb and was never seen again. Sensing an enormous relief from his burden, Christian became so excited that he cried out in joy. Jesus has given me rest by means of his sorrow and life by means of his death. He stood there for quite a while, weeping as tears streamed down his cheeks. He was in awe of what just happened. To think that just the sight of the cross could remove this burden and give him peace. Suddenly 3 shining angels appeared to him, and one of them said, "Peace be with you. Your sins are forgiven." A second angel stripped him of the old rags he was wearing and dressed him in new clothes. The third angel placed a mark on his forehead and gave him a certificate with a seal on it. The angel then instructed Christian to look at it for comfort as he ran on the highway, and then to deliver it at the gate of the celestial city. After this, the angels left him. Christian could barely contain his joy and began leaping while passionately singing, "I've traveled so far with my burden of sin, but no one could ease the grief I was in. Until I came here, what a place this is. Is this where I will start being blessed? Is this where the burden fell off my back? Is this where the cords that bound it to me broke? Bless the cross, bless the tomb. Blessed rather be the man who is there put to shame for me." That's nice. Christian continued joyfully on the way until he came to the bottom of a hill, where he saw 3 men fast asleep with chains attached at their ankles. The name of one was Simple, another was named Lazy, and the third was called Arrogance. They were all lying around on the ground, and Christian was still full of joy, believed he could help by waking them from their stupor. "Wake up," he said. "You're acting like men who are close to drowning in deep waters, but completely unaware of the danger you're in. If you'll trust me, I'll help you get those chains off." Christian was surprised when they did not immediately respond. He tried once again with a more direct approach, saying, "If a roaring lion should come by this way, you will certainly become his prey." Completely unconcerned from their welfare, the men merely glanced up at Christian. "I don't see any danger," replied Simple, barely batting an eye at his surroundings, before drifting back off to sleep. Lazy, unwilling to even lift his head, uttered, "I believe a little more sleep will help," as he drifted back off. And Arrogance boldly asserted, "Let each man look after himself," and so the three of them lay back down and fell asleep. Christian, knowing there was nothing else he could do, went on his way. But it troubled him to think that these men, who were in chains and obvious danger, could completely disregard the kindness of another offering to freely help them. Okay, bye. I'll also post the card on Twitter, too, so if you don't catch it. Bye. Have a good night. Christian could not stop thinking about this disturbing encounter as he walked along the way. Then he spotted two men climbing over the wall on the left-hand side of the narrow way. Their names were Formalism and Hypocrisy, and they hurried along to catch up with him. "Gentlemen, where did you come from, and where are you heading?" Christian asked, a little surprised to see them. Formalism and Hypocrisy replied, "We were born in the land of vain glory and are going to Mount Zion to receive praise and honor." Christian had seen them climbing over the wall and said, "I'm curious, why did you not enter at the wicket gate, located at the beginning of the way?" Bye. "Don't you know that it's written, if someone does not enter in the door but climbs over some other way, that person is the same as a thief and a robber?" "That may be true," they said. "However, our countrymen have all agreed that this entrance, or wicket gate as you call it, is unnecessary and just too far away. We prefer to take this shortcut right here by climbing over the wall. It's easier and requires less effort." Christian paused for a moment and then said, "But will the Lord of the celestial city where we're heading not consider this a violation against his revealed will? Is it not trespassing?" Formalism and Hypocrisy glanced at each other and smiled. "There's no need to trouble yourself with this. You see, our manner of climbing over this wall has been a long-established tradition. In fact, many witnesses would testify that it's been accepted as an established route for over 1,000 years. "I understand that this is your tradition," Christian said, "but are you quite sure that your custom will stand up in a court of law?" "Of course, we don't doubt it for a moment," they said. "An impartial judge would never consider a practice that's been customary for over 1,000 years illegal. And besides, what difference does it make how we get on the way as long as we get on it? If we are in, we are in. As we see it, you arrived on the way by coming in at the wicket gate. We came in by climbing over the wall. What makes your way any better than ours?" "I will tell you exactly what," Christian said, and he began to explain. "I walk by the rule of my master, but you walk by the rude workings of your own desires. I have no doubt that the Lord will surely declare your deceitful thieves when you arrive at the end of the way. You came in by yourselves without his direction, and you will go out by yourselves without his mercy." The men did not respond to Christian, other than to tell him to mind his own business. All the men continued traveling on the way without talking. That is, until Formalism and Hypocrisy felt compelled to defend themselves as to the laws and ordinances. Knowing they were not as conscientious in obeying them as Christian, they said, "We don't see where you're really any different from us except for the coat you're wearing, which was probably given to you by one of your neighbors to cover the shame of your nakedness." Christian was struck by their directness and said, "I would not be counting on laws and ordinances to save you, since you did not come in by the wicket gate. And as for the coat I'm wearing, it was given to me by the Lord of the celestial city, as you say, to cover my nakedness. I consider it a token of his kindness to me, since I previously had nothing but rags. Besides, it brings me comfort as I travel on the way. I have no doubt that when I arrive at the gate of the celestial city, the Lord will know me, since I'm wearing the coat that he freely gave me on that day, that he stripped me of my rags. And what's more, perhaps you have noticed this mark on my forehead. It was placed there by one of his shining angels, the day my burden fell off my back. In addition to all of this, I was given this sealed certificate to read for comfort as I go along the way. I was told to return it once I arrived at the gate of the celestial city as a token of my authorization to enter. However, I doubt that you're concerned about any of these things, since you did not enter at the wicket gate." By the way, the wicket gate is so important because you are allowed in. You have to knock. Like, God is always there ready to let you in, but you have to knock first. You have to have, a desire to enter in, if that makes sense. You can't just take a shortcut like these guys are doing. You have to go through the wicket gate. You have to be allowed to enter by him. So that's the only way to get into the way. So that's why he's so hung up over the wicket gate. Once again, they had no answer for Christian. Instead, they looked at each other and burst out laughing. Christian decided there was no need to continue this journey anymore with them, so he moved on ahead. Sometimes he would talk to himself, other times he would groan, while still many other times he would feel refreshed from reading the certificate that the angel had given him. They all continued traveling on the way until arriving at the foot of the Hill of Difficulty, where there was a spring. There was also an intersection of two other ways that came straight from the wicket gate, one that turned to the left and one to the right of the hill, but the narrow way that Christian was told to take went straight up the hill called Difficulty. Christian was thirsty, so he walked over and drank from the spring of life. He then went straight up the hill, saying, "Regardless of how high and difficult this hill is, I'm determined to walk up it, because I know it leads to the way of life. I might become weak or even scared, but I will have courage and press on, because it's better to be on the right path, even if it's difficult, than to go an easier way that ends in misery." When formalist and hypocrisy came to the foot of the hill, they stopped in their tracks when they saw how steep and high the narrow way was. It was then they noticed the two alternative roads, one to the right and the other to the left of the hill. After talking it over, they assumed these would be easier routes and would likely meet up with Christian on the other side. The name of one of these roads was Danger, and the other Destruction. One turned to the left on the way of danger and lost his One turned to the left on the way of danger and lost his way in a great forest. The other took the right on the way to destruction, which led him to a wide field full of dark mountains, where he stumbled and fell, never to be seen again. And I then looked back at Christian to see how far he had made it up the hill. At first I saw him run, then walk, and then resort to crawling on his hands and knees because of how steep it was. Now about halfway to the top there was a shady arbor made by the Lord of the Hill for those who traveled by that they might find rest. Exhausted, Christian sat down, took the certificate out of his chest pocket, and began to read it for comfort. He also stopped and was pleased to admire his new clothes, given to him when he stood before the cross. After reading the certificate and feeling quite content, he nodded off into a deep sleep, dropping the certificate from his hand. Around sunset, someone approached and shook Christian awake, saying, "You lazy fool, look at the ant and watch it closely. Let it teach you a thing or two." At this, Christian jumped up and started on his way. Trying to make up for lost time, he raced ahead until he came to the top of the hill. When he was close to the top of the hill, two men named Nervousness and Mistrust came running down at full force to meet him. Christian held up his hands to slow them down. "What's the matter?" he said. "Don't you realize that you're running the wrong way?" "We were going to the city of Zion," said Nervousness, pointing up the hill, "but the farther we climbed up the hill of difficulty, the more danger we encountered. It just became too risky, so we got scared and decided to turn around and head back home." "Not only that," said Mistrust, trying to catch his breath, "but we came upon two lions lying in the way in front of us. We weren't sure if they were asleep or not, but we knew they would attack us if we got too close and tear us limb from limb." Christian began to feel a little uneasy. "Now you have me fearing what's ahead, but where else can I go to be safe? If I go back to the city of destruction, which is destined for fire and brimstone, I will die there for sure. However, I know I will be safe if I can just make it to the celestial city. It seems to me that if I turn back now, I will certainly die. If I go forward, I might experience the fear of death, but with the assurance of everlasting life." With that, Christian knew what he must do. There's no question. I must move forward. Christian. Mistrust and Nervousness just... Hi. I keep getting tongue-tied. How are you? I'm almost done with this chapter, and then we can read Peter Pan if you want. Okay. How the heck are ya? Okay. Whoa. One more page. We can do this. Aw. Yay. Mistrust and nervousness just shook their heads and ran down the hill while Christian continued traveling on the difficult way. As he walked, Christian could not stop thinking about the frightening story the men had told. For comfort, he reached down to his chest pocket to feel for his certificate, but to his surprise, it was not there. He immediately began to panic, not knowing what to do. The certificate was not only there to relieve him of his fears, but also to provide him entrance into the celestial city. Then he recalled sleeping in the shady arbor by the side of the hill and suspected that he had lost the certificate there. Feeling like a lazy fool, he fell to his knees and prayed that God would forgive him. He then got up and raced back down the hill to find it. With each step, Christian's heart grew heavier and heavier. Sometimes he sighed, other times he wept, and often he just scolded himself, saying, "I'm such a fool for sleeping during the day in a place meant only to provide temporary rest." Farther and farther he ran back down the hill, carefully retracing each step, looking all around for any sight of the certificate that had proved him so much comfort. As the shady arbor came into view, where he had rested and slept, he was once again filled with remorse for what he had done. "I'm such a miserable person that I should sleep in the daytime," he bemoaned. "In the middle of difficulty, I should so indulge myself by sleeping in a place that the Lord of the Hill provided only for the temporary relief of weary travelers." Oh no. Same. "How many needless steps have I taken with no result? This is exactly what happened to Israel. They were sent back again to wander in the wilderness by way of the Red Sea because of their sin. In the same way, I'm forced to walk this way again in misery that might have been walked in joy had it not been for this sinful sleep. I know I would have been so much farther on my journey by this time. Instead, I must walk these steps 3 times instead of once. And now it's starting to get dark, and the day is almost over. I wish I had never slept." Reaching the arbor, he sat down and wept. Then, looking around, he spotted his certificate under the seat. He was so excited that he quickly grabbed the certificate and thrust it into his chest pocket. Christian's spirit erupted with cries of joyful praise to God, for the certificate was his assurance of salvation and acceptance at the celestial city. He pressed the certificate to his heart and gave thanks to God for directing his eyes to where it was lying. With joyful tears, he focused on moving again ahead in his journey. Oh, how carefully did he climb the rest of the hill, but as he reached the top, Christian noticed the sun was going down. He painfully recalled the foolishness of his sleeping and how it had delayed him from being so much farther ahead by now. In his grief, he said, "My sinful sleep has caused me so much difficulty. Because of it, my journey, which should have been during the daylight, is now in the darkness of night. I must now walk in the dark, not knowing where to step next, all while hearing the noises of frightening creatures just because of my miserable sleep." Then he remembered the story of mistrust and nervousness and how scared they were at the sight of the lions in the path. Christian thought to himself, "These beasts prowl in the night, seeking their prey, so if they should meet me in the dark, how will I avoid being torn to pieces?" He cautiously went on his way, complaining about his terrible circumstances. Then he looked up and saw a magnificent palace directly in front of him, called the Palace Beautiful. It stood to one side of the way. The end. I'll read another sometime soon. The Palace Beautiful. That's such a nice name. I like that everything is just called what it is. What would your name be if you were in this book? Because I don't know what mine would be. Maybe anxious. No, that's not nice. Thank you. I agree. I really like this book. It's super, I don't know. It makes me think. That one was a little uneventful, but he did get his burden off his back, so that's cool. Stubborn, that's good. Yeah, so far we've met, hold on. I wonder if it'll tell me. So far we've met obstinate, pliable. Obstinate's pretty much like stubborn. Pliable is like easily persuaded. Mr. Worldly Wiseman. He's an asshole. Evangelist, he's really cool. Help was really nice. Oh, who's the other guy? Help was really nice, and then the guy that let him in. Oh, blah blah blah. Hold on, I'll find it. It was. He was at the gate. Here we go. Goodwill. There's a guy named Goodwill. And then the interpreter. I don't know. Help seems like a pretty. No, Help was really nice. He got stuck in the swamp of despair, and Help came along and helped him out. He's just really helpful. It was really nice. He's just like, he was kind of there to like offer encouragement, because the swamp of despair was like what is it? A metaphor or an analogy? Anyway, it's to illustrate basically like when we like fall into despair in life, like you feel like hopeless and like your life's never gonna get better or easier, and people come along. Sometimes a person will come along and offer you encouragement through it. Truly living up to the name. Yeah, they really just are what their names are. And then he just met arrogance. Oof. Arrogance, lazy, and simple. And they were very simple, lazy, and arrogant. Yeah. And then I think his name was Formalism, I think. And what was that one guy's name? Formalism, and I think it starts with an H. Hold on. Formalism. Totally does. Hypocrisy. Just met them. They didn't last very long. I think they both died pretty quick. They thought they could like find a shortcut instead of the right way to do it. Anyway, it's all pretty much about getting into heaven, kind of. That's like the end goal, but also like making sure you stay on the right path in life, kind of deal. But anywho, would you like me to read Peter Pan? Or we could just talk? I don't know. I don't know. It's up to you. Or I could keep reading this. I don't mind. I have to read it anyway every week for book study. So it's up to you. The next chapter is The Arrival at the Palace Beautiful. Either one. I can't decide. For real though, how are you? How's your week? I can't remember. I tried to stream Saturday. I got discouraged. And then I stopped. Yeah. But I did finish the birthday card. So I'm kind of mad at myself. I didn't like finish it on a stream. But I don't know. That was a rough day. I was like not having a pretty day. Didn't feel like I looked good on camera. And then I streamed for like an hour and nobody came in yet, so which is fine. But it was like, and I kept messing up. Like, what did I mess up? Well, not messing up, but I wasn't organized and it was taking longer than I wanted it to, and like my closet gets so hot. I was getting like hot and like, anyway. But I can show you the card. I gotta go get it. You just, here. BRB. Doo-dee-doo. Okay. Wow. Back in the blanket. Okay. I have bunnies. Okay. This is the card. I'm just gonna. There you go. This is the front. She wanted it just covered in glitter. Oh my gosh, glitter is something else, man. Whoa. Really hard to work with, and I couldn't get it to stick to the places I wanted it to, and it was sticking to places I didn't want it to, and it was and honestly, I hate the way the front of the card looks, personally, but I know she's gonna like it because she just wanted it to be covered in glitter. So this is the front. Whoa. It's just a big old hot mess, and all this weird color going on is just glitter. But it does say I love you, and that's nice. I should probably, here, I'll just do this. Okay, there you go. Super glittery and fun. I love these tiny little candies that I used and these tiny little hearts. Anyway, then the opening it, oh, and the back looks like that. More glitter, just all the glitter I could use. All right, and this is what it looks like on the inside. Ta-da! And so much glitter, oh my gosh. But yeah, I love the little reflective hearts. Those are fun. I think it turned out pretty dang cute. Yeah, and I love the way I wrote her name. It's so fancy. But yeah, I think she's gonna like it. I'm so excited. Wait, I have to look at something. Okay. Cute. Cute, cute. Yeah. So yeah, happy about that. Wow. I'm gonna probably read Peter Pan though, because it makes me happy. What chapter are we on? I think we're on the good chapter. They're all good. But, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, this is a good one. He, like, teaches them how to fly and stuff. It's nice. This is a pretty decently length chapter, too. But, yeah. Also, I'm so excited. My sister is I think she's a cosmetologist. She does hair. She's really good at hair. And I love my hair, so I try to take care of it. And she has put me on a different shampoo. So I'm about to change my shampoo, and I'm really excited that it's gonna be better for it. Because right now, it's not doing amazing, so anyway, that's a new development. I don't know why I shared that. Okay, so we're on chapter 3 of Peter Pan, and this one is called Come Away, Come Away. I think you were there when we read the first 2 chapters too, so. Recap was, it's not much. Mrs. Darling saw Peter Pan in the nursery, and he flew out, but they caught his shadow. So they've got his shadow. So this chapter is where he comes back to get his shadow. Yeah. That's pretty much all we've seen. Mr. Darling is a jerk, but he doesn't mean to be. I think Mr. Darling is hilarious, but he's also, like, ridiculous. He kind of reminds me of, nope, I'm not going to say that. Okay. For a moment, I don't know if someone would want to be compared to Mr. Darling, so, okay. My hair. I put the fan on because I don't like getting hot, but now my hair is, like, getting all up in my biz. Alright, For a moment after Mr. and Mrs. Darling left the house, the night lights by the beds of the 3 children continued to burn clearly. They were awfully nice little night lights, and one cannot help wishing that they could have kept awake to see Peter. But Wendy's light blinked and gave such a yawn that the other 2 yawned also, and before they could close their mouths, all the 3 went out. There was another light in the room now, 1,000 times brighter than the night lights, and in the time we have taken to say this, it has been in all the drawers in the nursery, looking for Peter's shadow, rummaged the wardrobe, and turned every pocket inside out. It was not really a light. It made this light by flashing about so quickly, but when it came to rest for a second, you saw it was a fairy, no longer than your hand, but still growing. It was a girl called Tinker Bell, exquisitely gowned in a skeleton leaf, cut low and square, through which her figure could be seen to the best advantage. She was slightly inclined to ebon point. A moment after the fairy's entrance, the window was blown open by the breathing of the little stars, and Peter dropped in. He had carried Tinker Bell part of the way, and his hand was still messy with the fairy dust. "Tinker Bell," he called softly, after making sure that the children were asleep. "Tink, where are you?" She was in a jug for the moment, and liking it extremely. She had never been in a jug before. "Oh, do come out of that jug and tell me, do you know where they put my shadow?" The loveliest tinkle as of golden bells answered him. It is the fairy language. You ordinary children can never hear it, but if you were to hear it, you would know that you had heard it once before. Tink said that the shadow was in the big box. She meant the chest of drawers, and Peter jumped at the drawers, scattering their contents to the floor with both hands, as kings toss halfpence to the crowd. In a moment he had recovered his shadow, and in his delight he forgot that he had shut Tinker Bell up in the drawer. If he thought at all, but I don't believe he ever thought, it was that he and his shadow, when brought near each other, would join like drops of water, and when they did not, he was appalled. He tried to stick it on with soap from the bathroom, but that also failed. A shudder passed through Peter, and he sat on the floor and cried. His sobs woke Wendy, and she sat up in bed. She was not alarmed to see a stranger crying on the nursery floor. She was only pleasantly interested. "Boy," she said courteously, "why are you crying?" Peter could be exceedingly polite also, having learned the grand manner at fairy ceremonies, and he rose and bowed to her beautifully. She was much pleased, and bowed beautifully to him from the bed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Wendy Moira Angela Darling," she replied with some satisfaction. "What is your name?" "Peter Pan." She was already sure that he must be Peter, but She was already sure that he must be Peter, but it did seem a comparatively short name. "Is that all?" "Yes," he said rather sharply. He felt for the first time that it was a shortish name. "I'm so sorry," said Wendy Moira Angela. "It doesn't matter," Peter gulped. She asked where he lived. "Second to the right," said Peter, and then straight on till morning. "What a funny address." Peter had a sinking. For the first time he felt that perhaps it was a funny address. "No, it isn't," he said. "I mean," Wendy said nicely, remembering that she was hostess, "is that what they put on the letters?" "Don't get any letters." He wished she had not mentioned letters, and he said it contemptuously. "But your mother gets letters." "Don't have a mother," he said. Not only had he no mother, but he had not the slightest desire to have one. He thought them very overrated persons. Wendy, however, felt at once that she was in the presence of a tragedy. "Oh, Peter, no wonder you were crying," she said, and got out of bed and ran to him. "I wasn't crying about mothers," he said rather indignantly. "I was crying because I can't get my shadow to stick on. Besides, I wasn't crying." "It has come off?" "Yes." Then Wendy saw the shadow on the floor, looking so draggled, and she was frightfully sorry for Peter. "How awful," she said, but she could not help smiling when she saw that he had been trying to stick it on with soap. How exactly like a boy. Fortunately, she knew at once what to do. "It must be sewn on," she said, just a little patronizingly. "What's sewn?" he asked. "You're dreadfully ignorant." "No, I'm not." But she was exulting in his ignorance. "I shall sew it on for you, my little man," she said, though he was as tall as herself, and she got out her housewife and sewed the shadow onto Peter's foot. I dare say it will hurt a little, she warned him. Oh, I shan't cry, said Peter, who was already of opinion that he had never cried in his life. And he clenched his teeth and did not cry, and soon his shadow was behaving properly, though still a little creased. Perhaps I should have ironed it, Wendy said thoughtfully, but Peter, boylike, was indifferent to appearances, and he was now jumping up in the wildest glee. Alas, he had already forgotten that he owed his bliss to Wendy. He thought he had attached the shadow himself. How clever I am, he cried. He crowed rapturously. Oh, the cleverness of me! It is humiliating to have to confess that this conceit of Peter was one of his most fascinating qualities. To put it with brutal frankness, there never was a cockier boy. But for a moment Wendy was shocked. You conceit! She exclaimed with frightful sarcasm. Of course, I did nothing. Oh, you did a little, Peter said carelessly, and continued to dance. A little, she replied with haughty air. If I am no use, I can at least withdraw. And she sprang in the most dignified way into bed and covered her face with the blankets. To induce her to look up, he pretended to be going away, and when this failed, he sat on the end of the bed and tapped her gently with his foot. Wendy, he said, don't withdraw. I can't help crowing, Wendy, when I'm pleased with myself. Still she would not look up, though she was listening eagerly. Wendy, he continued, in a voice that no woman has ever yet been able to resist. Wendy, one girl is worth more than 20 boys. Now, Wendy was every inch a woman, though there were not very many inches, and she peeped out of the bedclothes. Do you really think so, Peter? Yes, I do. I think it's perfectly sweet of you, she declared, and I'll get up again. And she sat up with him on the side of the bed. She also said she would give him a kiss if he liked, but Peter did not know what she meant, and he held out his hand expectantly. Surely you know what a kiss is? She asked aghast. I shall know when you give it to me, he replied stiffly, and not to hurt his feelings, she gave him a thimble. Now, he said, shall I give you a kiss? And she replied with a slight primness, if you please. She made herself rather cheap by inclining her face toward him, but he merely dropped an acorn button into her hand, so she slowly returned her face to where it had been before, and said nicely that she would wear his kiss on the chain round her neck. It was lucky that she did put it on that chain, for it was afterwards to save her life. When people in our set are introduced, it is customary for them to ask each other's age, and so Wendy, who always liked to do the correct thing, asked Peter how old he was. It was not really a happy question to ask him. It was like an examination paper that asks grammar, when what you want to be asked is Kings of England. I don't know, he replied uneasily, but I am quite young. He really knew nothing about it. He had merely suspicions. But he said at a venture, Wendy, I ran away the day I was born. Wendy was quite surprised, but interested, and she indicated in the charming drawing-room manner by a touch on her nightgown that he could sit nearer her. It was because I heard father and mother, he explained in a low voice, talking about what I was to be when I became a man. He was extraordinarily agitated now. I don't want ever to be a man, he said with passion. I want always to be a little boy and to have fun. So I ran away to Kensington Gardens and lived a long time among the fairies. She gave him a look of the most intense admiration, and he thought it was because he had run away, but it was really because he knew fairies. Wendy had lived such a home life that to know fairies struck her as quite delightful. She poured out questions about them, to his surprise, for they were rather a nuisance to him, getting in his way and so on, and indeed he sometimes had to give them a hiding. Still, he liked them on the whole, and he told her about the beginning of fairies. You see, Wendy, when the first baby laughed for the first time, its laugh broke into 1,000 pieces, and they all went skipping about, and that was the beginning of fairies. Tedious talk, this, but being a stay-at-home, she liked it. And so, he went on good-naturedly, there ought to be one fairy for every boy and girl. Ought to be? Isn't there? No. You see, children know such a lot now. They soon don't believe in fairies. And every time a child says, I don't believe in fairies, there's a fairy somewhere that falls down dead. Really, he thought they had now talked enough about fairies, and it struck him that Tinker Bell was keeping very quiet. I can't think where she has gone to, he said, rising. And he called Tink by name. Wendy's heart went flutter with a sudden thrill. Peter, she cried, clutching him. You don't mean to tell me that there is a fairy in this room? She was here just now, he said a little impatiently. You don't hear her, do you?" And they both listened. "The only sound I hear," said Wendy, is like a tinkle of bells." "Well, that's Tink. That's the fairy language. I think I hear her too." The sound came from the chest of drawers, and Peter made a merry face. No one could ever look quite so merry as Peter, and the loveliest of gurgles was his laugh. He had his first laugh still. "Wendy," he whispered gleefully, "I do believe I shut her up in the drawer." He let poor Tink out of the drawer, and she flung about the nursery, screaming with fury. "You shouldn't say such things," Peter retorted. "Of course I'm very sorry, but how could I know you were in the drawer?" Wendy was not listening to him. "Oh, Peter," she cried, "if she would only stand still and let me see her." "They hardly ever stand still," he said, but for one moment Wendy saw the romantic figure come to rest on the cuckoo clock. "Oh, the lovely!" she cried, though Tink's face was still distorted with passion. "Tink," said Peter amiably, "this lady says she wishes you were her fairy." Tinker Bell answered insolently. "What does she say, Peter?" He had to translate. "She is not very polite. She says you are a great ugly girl, and that she is my fairy." He tried to argue with Tink. "You know you can't be my fairy, Tink, because I am a gentleman, and you are a lady." To this Tink replied in these words, "You silly ass," and disappeared into the bathroom. "She is quite a common fairy," Peter explained apologetically. "She is called Tinker Bell because she mends the pots and kettles." They were together in the armchair by this time, and Wendy plied him with more questions. "If you don't live in Kensington Gardens now, sometimes I do still. But where do you live mostly now?" "With the Lost Boys." "Who are they?" "They are the children who fall out of their perambulators when the nurse is looking the other way. If they are not claimed in 7 days, they are sent far away to the Neverland to defray expenses. I'm captain." "What fun it must be!" "Yes," said cunning Peter, "but we are rather lonely. You see, we have no female companionship." "Are none of the others girls?" "Oh, no. Girls, you know, are much too clever to fall out of their prams." This flattered Wendy immensely. "I think," she said, "it is perfectly lovely the way you talk about girls. John there just despises us." For reply, Peter rose and kicked John out of bed, blankets and all, one kick. This seemed to Wendy rather forward for a first meeting, and she told him with spirit that she was not captain in her house. However, John continued to sleep so placidly on the floor that she allowed him to remain there. "And I know you meant to be kind," she said, relenting, "so you may give me a kiss." For the moment she had forgotten his ignorance about kisses. "I thought you would want it back," he said a little bitterly, and offered to return her the thimble. "Oh dear," said the nice Wendy, "I don't mean a kiss. I mean a thimble." "What's that?" "It's like this," and she kissed him. "Funny," said Peter gravely. "Now shall I give you a thimble?" "If you wish to," said Wendy, keeping her head erect this time. Peter thimbled her, and almost immediately she screeched. "What is it, Wendy?" "It was exactly as if someone were pulling my hair." "That must have been Tink. I never knew her so naughty before." And indeed, Tink was darting about again, using offensive language. "She says she will do that to you, Wendy, every time I give you a thimble." "But why?" "Why, Tink?" Again Tink replied, "You silly ass." Peter could not understand why, but Wendy understood. And she was just slightly disappointed when he admitted that he came to the nursery window not to see her, but to listen to stories. "You see, I don't know any stories. None of the Lost Boys know any stories." "How perfectly awful," Wendy said. "Do you know," Peter asked, "why swallows build in the eaves of houses? It is to listen to the stories." "Oh, Wendy, your mother was telling you such a lovely story." "Which story was it?" "About the prince who couldn't find the lady who wore the glass slipper." "Peter," said Wendy excitedly, "that was Cinderella. And he found her, and they lived happily ever after." Peter was so glad that he rose from the floor where they had been sitting and hurried to the window. "Where are you going?" she cried with misgiving. "To tell the other boys." "Don't go, Peter," she entreated. "I know such lots of stories." Those were her precise words, so there can be no denying that it was she who first tempted him. He came back, and there was a greedy look in his eyes now, which ought to have alarmed her, but did not. "Oh, the stories I could tell to the boys," she cried, and then Peter gripped her and began to draw her toward the window. "Let me go," she ordered him. "Wendy, do come with me and tell the other boys." Of course she was very pleased to be asked, but she said, "Oh dear, I can't. Think of Mummy. Besides, I can't fly." "I'll teach you." "Oh, how lovely to fly." "I'll teach you how to jump on the wind's back, and then away we go." "Oh," she exclaimed rapturously. "Wendy, Wendy, when you are sleeping in your silly bed, you might be flying about with me, saying funny things to the stars. And Wendy, there are mermaids." "Mermaids with tails? Such long tails." "Oh," cried Wendy, "to see a mermaid." He had become frightfully cunning. "Wendy," he said, "how we should all respect you." She was wiggling her body in distress. It was quite as if she was trying to remain on the nursery floor. But he had no pity for her. "Wendy," he said, the sly one, "you could tuck us in at night. None of us have ever been tucked in at night." "Oh!" And her arms went out to him. "And you could darn our clothes and make pockets for us. None of us have any pockets." How could she resist? "Of course it's awfully fascinating," she cried. "Peter, would you teach John and Michael to fly too?" "If you like," he said indifferently, and she ran to John and Michael and shook them. "Wake up," she cried. "Peter Pan has come, and he is to teach us to fly." John rubbed his eyes. "Then I shall get up," he said. Of course he was on the floor already. "Hello," he said, "I am up." Michael was up by this time also, looking as sharp as a knife with 6 blades and a saw. But Peter suddenly signed silence. Their faces assumed the awful craftiness of children listening for sounds from the grown-up world. All was as still as salt. Then everything was right. No, stop! Everything was wrong. Nana had been barking distressfully all the evening. But was quiet now. It was her silence they had heard. "Out with the light! Hide, quick!" cried John, taking command for the only time throughout the whole adventure. And thus when Liza entered, holding Nana, the nursery seemed quite its old self, very dark, and you could have sworn you heard its 3 wicked inmates breathing angelically as they slept. They were really doing it artfully behind the window curtains. Liza was in a bad temper, for she was mixing the Christmas puddings in the kitchen, and had been drawn away from them, with a raisin still on her cheek, by Nana's absurd suspicions. She thought the best way of getting a little quiet was to take Nana to the nursery for a moment, but in custody, of course. "There, you suspicious brute," she said, not sorry that Nana was in disgrace. "They are perfectly safe, aren't they? Every one of the little angels, sound asleep in bed. Listen to their gentle breathing." Here Michael, encouraged by his success, breathed so loudly that they were nearly detected. Nana knew that kind of breathing, and she tried to drag herself out of Liza's clutches. But Liza was dense. "No more of it, Nana," she said sternly, pulling her out of the room. "I warn you, if you bark again, I shall go straight for Master and Mrs. and bring them home from the party. And then, oh, won't Master whip you just." She tied the unhappy dog up again. But do you think Nana ceased to bark? Bring Master and Mrs. home from the party? Why, that was just what she wanted. Do you think she cared whether she was whipped, so long as her charges were safe? Unfortunately, Liza returned to her puddings, and Nana, seeing that no help would come from her, strained and strained at the chain until at last she broke it. In another moment she had burst into the dining room of 27 and flung up her paws to heaven, her most expressive way of making a communication. Mr. and Mrs. Darling knew at once that something terrible was happening in their nursery, and without a goodbye to their hostess, they rushed into the street. But it was now 10 minutes since 3... But it was now 10 minutes since 3 scoundrels had been breathing hard behind the curtains, and Peter Pan can do a great deal in 10 minutes. We now return to the nursery. "It's all right," John announced, emerging from his hiding place. "I say, Peter, can you really fly?" Instead of troubling to answer him, Peter Pan flew round the room, taking the mantelpiece on the way. "How topping!" said John and Michael. "How sweet!" cried Wendy. "Yes, I'm sweet. Oh, I am sweet," said Peter, forgetting his manners again. It looked delightfully easy, and they tried it first from the floor, and then from the beds, but they always went down instead of up. "I say, how do you do it?" asked John, rubbing his knee. He was quite a practical boy. "You just think lovely, wonderful things," Peter explained, "and they lift you up in the air." He showed them again. "You're so nippy at it," John said. "Couldn't you do it very slowly once?" Peter did it both slowly and quickly. "I've got it now, Wendy," cried John, but soon he found he had not. Not one of them could fly an inch, though even Michael was in words of 2 syllables, and Peter did not know A from Z. Of course, Peter had been trifling with them, for no one can fly unless the fairy dust has been blown on him. Fortunately, as we have mentioned, one of his hands was messy with it, and he blew some on each of them, with the most superb results. "Now just wiggle your... I cannot talk. "Now just wiggle your shoulders this way," he said, "and let go." They were all on their beds, and gallant Michael let go first. He did not quite mean to let go, but he did it, and immediately he was borne across the room. I flewed, he screamed, while still in midair. John let go and met Wendy near the bathroom. Oh, lovely! Oh, ripping! Look at me! Look at me! Look at me! They were not nearly so elegant as Peter. They could not help kicking a little, but their heads were bobbing against the ceiling, and there was almost nothing so delicious as that. Peter gave Wendy a hand at first, but had to desist. Tink was so indignant. Up and down they went, and round. Heavenly was Wendy's word. I say, cried John, why shouldn't we all go out? Of course it was to this that Peter had been luring them. Michael was ready. He wanted to see how long it took him to do 1 billion miles. But Wendy hesitated. Mermaids, said Peter again. And there are pirates. Pirates, cried John, seizing his Sunday hat. Let us go at once. It was just at this moment that Mr. and Mrs. Darling hurried with Nana out of 27. They ran into the middle of the street to look up at the nursery window. And yes, it was still shut, but the room was ablaze with light, and most heart-gripping sight of all, they could see in shadow on the curtain 3 little figures in night attire, circling round and round, not on the floor, but in the air. Not 3 figures, 4. In a tremble, they opened the street door. Mr. Darling would have rushed upstairs, but Mrs. Darling signed to him to go softly. She even tried to make her heart go softly. Will they reach the nursery in time? If so, how delightful for them, and we shall all breathe a sigh of relief. But there will be no story. On the other hand, if they are not in time, I solemnly promise that it will all come right in the end. They have reached the nursery in time. They would have reached the nursery in time had it not been that the little stars were watching them. Once again the stars blew the window open, and that smallest star of all called out, Cave, Peter! Peter knew that there was not a moment to lose. Come, he cried imperiously, and soared out at once into the night, followed by John and Michael and Wendy. Mr. and Mrs. Darling and Nana rushed into the nursery too late. The birds were flown. Yeah. Okay, well that was fun. But I was quite tongue-tied today. I kept getting messed up over my words. That's gotta be so annoying to hear. Or it's, I don't know. It's really annoying when I do it. So, what time is it? Okay. Well, I am gonna go. That was a pretty solid stream. I usually end up going like way longer than I mean to. So this was a good length. And I honestly don't think I'm gonna need to like edit anything out of it. So that's cool. Cool. But yeah, I'm trying to think for my next project. Hold on. So my sister's birthday is really soon, and then the next birthday, don't tell me, May. Okay, so the next birthday is my 2 brothers in July. So my next project is going to be we have a lot of birthday cards to make this year, basically. So, I'm not making everyone birthday cards. I'm going to make, from last year, whoever didn't get a birthday card is getting one this year, and whoever didn't get a Christmas card is getting one this year. So, technically, our next birthday is also in May, but I made her a birthday card last year, so this year I'm going to make her a Christmas card. That's my other sister. And then after that one, we have 2 birthdays in July. They didn't get birthday cards last year, so each of them are getting one. Then we have 2 birthdays in August, my 2 sisters, and one of them got a birthday card last year, so only 1 there. So that's 3 more so far. September we have a birthday, and I didn't make him, I've never made him a card at all, so I'm making him a birthday card. So that's 4. And then December we have 4 birthdays, and 2 of them are my parents. I made them a Christmas card last year, so they'll get birthday cards. They'll get birthday cards, and then, good grief, there's so many cards we're making this year. Okay. And then my brother in December, I made him a birthday card, so he's getting a Christmas card. So I think all in all, it's 3 Christmas cards and, yeah, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 birthday cards. I'm making 9 cards just throughout the year. But my deadline for the next 2 are July. So I gotta get a move on. And figure out the design. I haven't decided what they're even gonna look like yet, so. But all that to say, I'm taking like a tiny short break off of crafting because it really killed my back. My back is out right now. So I don't know when my next crafting stream is gonna be, but I'll definitely do another read aloud stream pretty soon. I just don't know when yet. We got busy times up ahead, so I'll just keep you posted on Twitter. But anyway, I hope you guys have, whoever ends up watching this or is currently watching it, I hope you have an amazing night, an amazing life, an amazing week. I said that out of order. And I'll talk to you soon, I hope. But thanks for watching. And wow. Thanks for watching. And I was gonna say, I love you so much. You're the best. All of you. Whoever. Everyone. I'll see you later. Bye.